Welcome to this Cambridge talk on teaching in a time of crisis. I'm Jane Atkinson, part of the Teaching and Learning Division here at Cambridge International. In these talks, we will be focusing on suggestions to support you and your learners in these challenging times. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Dr. Paul Beadle and Andrew Field.
Everyone, I'm Paul.
Hello, I'm Andrew. Delighted to meet you all.
This talk will be divided into two parts. Firstly, Paul will focus on the pedagogical approaches in the current situation. Then Andrew will help explore some practical examples of suggested online tools. So I'll now hand you over to Paul Beadle.
Thanks very much, Jane, and hello everybody, and I hope you're safe and well as I speak now. At the time we're living in now, it's a huge crisis for everybody, and I think it's brought so much disruption to our lives, but also our work as educators too. So, how can we recover? How can we be resilient? How can we recover as much as possible from this? For all of us, there's uncertainty and unpredictability, a feeling of not being quite in control. And these are our sort of first feelings, and our spirits might dip. We might be finding it difficult to think of what to do, and we can be forgiven for this. But then we can lift ourselves up and get on with our lives as best as we can. And in the image there, you see how the teacher and the student, that relationship is such a vital and important relationship. It's the foundation for education. And the challenge that we all have now is where schools are closed and where we're remote from our students, is how can we sustain learning and teaching which is engaging, enjoyable and worthwhile. And so although we're physically distant from our students, our learners, and yet we need to be as close as possible to them. So how can remote teaching form a stronger relationship and as supportive a learning experience as that in the school classroom? So I'm just going to touch upon a number of ideas, concepts, suggestions. Our approach is really to be as open as possible because we're learning ourselves through these challenging times. And these are points that we've found to be, we think, useful from our experience so far. So first of all, about yourself as a teacher, do look after yourself and your loved ones. You've got to try and be in good shape, physically and emotionally. Try and be as positive and optimistic as you can. Because if you're not, it's going to be very difficult for you to provide for and support your students. So of the day, in the day, try and structure your day as much as possible. Establish routines, kind of keep work and relaxation, play as it were, separate. Make sure you're clear about the contact time you're going to have with your students. It's clearly there in the day. Remember to take breaks. Get out as much as you can if you can. Get some fresh air, exercise. And what I've noticed is how much extra communication is going on, which is wonderful. Through the social media, but you need to be a little bit careful not to be overwhelmed by it. So try and kind of select those media, those websites and so on that help you and you can trust. So be true to yourself too. Do remember you're an experienced and an effective teacher. You've got what it takes. Your students, they want to see and hear from you and be guided by you. It doesn't matter. It's not face-to-face at the moment, as in the image there. It can be by video and audio, but they're going to be very appreciative of what you do, and they're going to understand that things may not work first time or every time. There may be some hiccups. It doesn't matter. As long as you kind of keep going and you maintain and develop those relationships that you have with your students. And so it's not only about who you are as a person, but remembering that you're a professional, you're an educator. You have the professional values, the knowledge and the skills to apply in this situation. And these qualities are going to help see you through this crisis, and you'll be able to set a model for your students. You're going to be able to kind of moderate their anxiety. You're going to help them to be resilient also. You can be steadfast now, and you can have hope for the future and give them hope for the future. It's okay if you don't have all the answers, but you can give yourself and your students a real sense of purpose and direction and next steps. So in those next steps, do be realistic. Be mindful of yourself, and look for and do things that you can do. Just small things to begin with. It's not everything at once. Just go day by day, week by week, and do take opportunities to learn new things. There's opportunity for some training, learning new skills, relying on your colleagues, and don't feel you have to be perfect. It's about being proactive and getting things done, and that's going to help you develop your confidence. So set yourself expectations that you feel you can do in the short term, and then go from there onwards, bit by bit. Keep in touch. Well, it's obviously keeping in touch with your students, but also it's keeping in touch with your colleagues. It could be that you might start to feel a bit lonely when you're teaching remotely, but the truth is we're all in this together. So do keep in touch whenever possible with your school colleagues, your buddies elsewhere, with us, with educators, around the world. Find out how they're getting on. What challenges are they facing? Share ideas and approaches. And it's okay because no one has all the answers. But by sharing and being part of a community of learning, we can develop the answers together. And it's pretty amazing already, humbling actually, to see how much initiative and real kindness that the education world is showing to each other. We're really pulling together. So you can trust your colleagues. You can rely upon them and your school leadership for support. You don't have to feel you have to be heroic in this. I'm sure your team spirit in your school is excellent, and that's going to really stand you in really good stead. But also don't forget your students are going to have lots of ideas themselves about what they'd like to do and how they'd like to learn. And as they become more used to learning at home, be open to them and involve them appropriately. They're going to have these ideas. Well, bring them in to that. Share those ideas with them. Take them on board. In the next piece of learning that you put together, show them that you're listening to them, and that's going to give them a real sense of being involved and having a bit more control over things, and that will help to develop their resilience. So focusing on the essentials, and the essentials, the essence of effective teaching, is about knowing how to instill engagement and enjoyment in learning, and it involves this cycle of practice from design through classroom teaching, classroom in apostrophes now, assessment and evaluation. And it's what you're good at. It's just that the learning environment and the situation are really different, and you're going to need to adapt to this in various ways using different means, but the ends are the same. It's about your students' learning and development and learning outcomes. So I put in those qualities at the bottom of this slide. These are the qualities of the Cambridge teacher. You're very familiar with them, I think, but it's worth going back to these, because if I just pick out innovative and engaged, you'll see what I mean. Innovative, we're saying that Cambridge teachers are creative and experimenting with new ideas and pursuing an inquiring approach in their teaching, open to new challenges, being resourceful, imaginative and flexible, always ready to learn and applying new skills and techniques. And then engaged, intellectually, professionally, socially, ready to make a difference, passionate about learning within and beyond the classroom, sharing knowledge and skills with teachers and the wider educational community. Well, when we developed these attributes of the Cambridge teacher a few years ago with Cambridge teachers around the world, we may not have realized just how how useful they are now as an anchor for us, and how relevant these are to us all in this situation. So being adaptable and able to adjust to these new conditions through adapting current strategies, but also developing new strategies. As I say, teachers are well able to adapt. As you can see in the image there, it's not always about sitting at the front, or you're sitting with your learners often. You're doing things inside the school, outside the school. So being adaptive, using a variety of appropriate strategies, and looking for a variety of ways in which to encourage active learning. So this is not new, but what is most importantly, we shouldn't be trying to say, well, this is what we do in school. And so remote teaching is about basically translating all of that into delivering it somehow into the home. It's really thinking about what approaches do we have at the moment that could translate really well into this new situation. And these could be things like using quizzes, questions for student discussion, and so on. And what really matters is that all your learners, all your students feel connected and involved, that they kind of get up looking forward to learn, they have positive, enjoyable and shared learning experiences. They're part of a learning group, they're not on their own. And they have a sense of direction. So we need to be providing for them ways and means of individual collaborative learning, through inquiry, performance, making things, presentations, lots of communication, lots of feedback. And you'll be thinking about how much structure to have to this, and how much planning, what kind of plans to set up. But it is really important to set expectations and develop a routine. There needs to be enough stability there for your students and their parents who are going to be actively involved, their families, in the students' learning. So you with the school, do have a very clear link with parents and students, and have definite communication lines and regular communications, a newsletter, for example, to tell them what's happening with suggestions for activities, and giving people a sense that school still goes on as a community, even though it's not physically in one place together. Of course, the thing about planning is what needs to allow for flexibility, and this is very true with this. So by all means, set out a plan, for example, for the week ahead. There's a clear picture of what's going to happen in the week, and points when you're going to be in touch with students and how that's going to happen, times when students are going to interact together. But allow for it to be flexible and not so pinned down that it doesn't allow for space and time for other things to be going on. Monitor progress over time, but accommodate the situation that we're in. You're looking for the best balance of online activity, offline, what goes on in the time when students not connected but busy in their home, directed guided learning, collaborative learning, learning that's supported by parents, individual learning, reading, writing, and so on. You're going to find this through experience, and feel that you have the freedom, as it were, to do this. Give yourself the room to try things out and learn from them. Because remember, you've got this focus always on the learning that you want to take place. So try the new approaches, take a step back from what you've been doing before. What other ways could there be in which to approach the learning outcome? What do I want my students to learn about? What skills, knowledge, and understanding do I want them to develop? What opportunities are there through online and other means? Be creative. And strangely enough, this experience may actually refresh your enthusiasms, your love of your subject, your phase, teaching, whatever. It's actually, there is that you're going to be discovering again things because you're trying to see what the essence of the learning is, and that's going to be strangely refreshing for you. So learning from a new experience, do be open-minded. Don't worry about things not going according to plan. There's bound to be surprises in this. Think about what happens in a constructive way, and share your reflections on that with your colleagues, your friends, family, and look for advice and offer your advice to your colleagues. So it's about looking to improve as you go on. And we'll all know a lot more about remote teaching and learning in a month's time than we do now, certainly. But as long as we think about it carefully and we see what we can learn from the experience to improve the way we go about things. So being resourceful now. Being resourceful, quick, sort of smart ways of overcoming problems. And there's an image that I found there, Creative Commons, a nice image of learning going on at the home, in the family. And that's one setting in one kind of home. But your context, well, I don't know your context. Around the world, we do know there's great variety and diversity of situations. So that means there isn't a fixed solution to this. You're going to design the approach that best suits you and your students, given practicalities, let alone anything else. So you going to find the best blend, variety of strategies and resources that you can use appropriate to your situation, and do be aware of each of your students and things that might possibly be any kind of barrier for their learning. For example, my grandson, was looking forward to a session led by the teacher online, and then he has an iPad. He doesn't have a laptop, and he didn't have a keyboard, and so he found it very difficult. But learn for the next time, and the teachers learnt too. So do be interested in what your parents and students say about their experiences of learning at home, and what works, what doesn't work so well, and why. And you can always adapt your approach so that each student feels supported and involved. And a learning environment is not just all about online. A lot of it can be about real-time interaction at home, offline, and using the home as an environment with lots of opportunities for developing skills and developing knowledge. Remember, it's a very dynamic and fluid space. I mean, that image looks nice and still, and very controlled, and very quiet, and so on. Life is not always like that at all kinds of interruptions. I've just had 2 dings there, which I'm sorry about that, from messages coming in. This is how life really is, and so be aware of that, accommodate that, and realize that things are pretty dynamic and fluid. And so how can you engage your students? Well, I think the first thing to say is that the best students is being part of a social group, seeing their friends and so on. So to make sure you arrange for during the week, during the day, a synchronous, real-time get-together by video, possible audio maybe, but to do things like reading, talking, sharing what they're doing. That's really, really important, and it's going to really help your students in terms of not feeling isolated and being apart from things. Another thing to remember is to think about assignments, work that is doable and reasonably simple. So try not to over design activities. Keep them reasonably simple and clear, and then build them up over time, but don't overreach in terms of the sophistication, kind of complexity of an assignment. And it's very important, the parents in that image, and it's very important to give parents advice about their own role in this and how they can best be involved. And things like setting good routines during the day, and gently guiding their children with their sort of studying, and giving practical steps for parents to take, and basically keeping in touch with parents, finding out how it's going from them, and giving them further advice. So what does technology offer you? Well, there are lots of tools, subject-specific content, discussion, collaboration, interaction, lots of online content, formative feedback, etc., etc. And Andrew's going to talk about quite a few of these in a minute or two. So for you, it's really about being selective. Be selective. What's most relevant for you and your students in context? What will you find most user-friendly and effective as an experience? Not about having to feel or assembling a massive toolkit that you have to carry around with you. That's really not a very good way of approaching it. Look for advice and pointers, such as from ourselves. Try things out, see what works best for you, and keep it simple and manageable, so you can feel reasonably well organized and setting things up and comfortable with running things online. Using the technology, you'll be looking for things which are easy to set up and you can organize and manage well. So maybe it's a good idea to start with a tool that you've had some familiarity with, then try adapting it to this new context and see how you get on from there. But most importantly, I would say your communication with your teacher colleagues. So not only structured formal team meetings and get-togethers with your colleagues, but also informal, collaborative time. Just give yourself time and space, social time and space, just to share ideas and experience. Like I say, relax. This is a stressful time, but try and have moments where you can be relaxed and very open, as you would be together in the school. Again, remotely, but don't feel remote from your colleagues. Get together through social media, have these relaxed conversations, and be creative and collaborative. So I hope some of that is helpful to you. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Andrew, who's going to give you, I'm sure, lots of really interesting practical ideas now. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. In this next section, we're going to look at some, as you can see on the screen there, some examples of online tools that may be of interest to you to actually implement all of those great ideas and suggestions you've just heard from Paul. Now, this is the Cambridge Assessment International Education website near the end of March 2020, and you can see here there's a slight clue to what we're focusing on at the moment. But all of the materials you can find, both from this presentation and additional ones that we upload in the future, will be clearly signposted from here. And at the moment, we've arranged this section, you can see on the screen here, Teaching and Learning When School is Closed. And within here, we've added different sections and different suggestions where not only is this recording going to be available with follow-up discussions and additional ideas, but we've also got these other sections that we can look at. And the ones I think is most relevant at this very point is to look here at the tools to support remote teaching and learning. So just popping into this section, this is an area that we've tried not to make direct suggestions about here's a tool you must use, but instead look at some best ways to implement things within your context. So what's the best thing for you to use? How might you approach things slightly differently? And in the real content here is here in these accordion sections, which when you click on, you can get additional sections. So here we've got a range of tools that suggest things that can support discussion. And as you can see here, there's lots of different sections where all we've really done here is said this might be of use to you. You might like to consider implementing the technology in this way. And we feel enormously strongly about how important you as teachers are. You know your learners, you know when actually there might be a different way of approaching this topic. There might be a different way of, actually, I've always taught this topic in this way, but within our current challenges we've got, there might be a different tool we could use to explore. And one of the things I hope to go on to talk about is actually about opening that challenge out to your learners anyway. As Paul was talking about, it's all about learning. Everyone's learning through this current situation and looking to improve as you go on. And this balance of online and offline is so important. It's not about directing learners to say, today we're doing this tool for a quiz, or today here's a section for online learning content. It's about finding tools that add value to your existing teaching. It is absolutely fine not to use technology. A really good lesson can be sparked from a fantastic question, and it actually then spurs further discussion, further ideas. But it's about using technology to enhance these lessons. Where the technology adds value, that is transformational in its impact. And there's an enormous opportunity with all the current awful situation where people are stuck in places, family members ill, and so on. But it's a way that you as a teacher can pluck some positives out from this situation to see what you can do. So these tools here are ones to explore, and within each section we've added here sort of why you might like to consider these. But then what I'd like to go on to is just to explore just a couple of these tools to suggest why they might be of use to you in your subject or context. In terms of facilitating discussion and collaboration, again, as I was just saying, there's a choice for you here. You can lead learners and say, I'd like you to use this tool. But even more powerful is putting your learners in as a teacher to say, what would we like to use here? What do you feel is the most appropriate tool? And similarly, when using this technology, if things don't go well, exactly as Paul has said, that's a learning experience in itself. You can get learners to reflect on that and say, well, yeah, you did ask us to consider that tool, but didn't work particularly well, and here's the reasons why. And then you can trigger further discussion to say, actually, what do you think then? What would be better next? So as long as you're exploring all these ways of continually improving and developing, it's a fantastic opportunity. So one tool I'd like to mention is Flipgrid. It's one that is accessible through many Microsoft accounts and other tools. The real power of this, though, is about the learner voice. The best example of this I've seen thus far is where a teacher was recorded with a challenge, an idea, a suggestion, and then just opens up the discussion to learners. The lovely part of this, sort of thinking back to when I was teaching, is that often you had learners who would put their hand up and they'd always be the first to respond, or the one who's really keen to share their ideas. And what Flipgrid does is allow you as the teacher to encourage everyone to respond. And through the different media, through the different use of technology, it's amazing to see that maybe that learner who is particularly vocal in class is entirely different through a different media. And actually the learner who you know does always have the answer but isn't quite confident enough to put their hand up in class or respond to a request. Here, a different media, more comfortable, one where they can pre-record it and things like that, is really interesting to see what then happens. So with Flipgrid, you essentially set up a class grid. Now, you need to be careful about some of the settings here, but by default, they're particularly set up for e-safety. So what we're doing is you control all this, you set how public these things are. So as a teacher, make obviously careful use of all the e-safety options and make sure you use the default ones before you explore anything further. But essentially here, you get to record the video and then your learners can respond to it. But again, once you've used this with a few learners, why not put that task over to them? You could have groups of learners recording the trigger video, and then others have to respond to that. This is a thing, again, that you can collaborate with and explore and find the best way for your learners. The thing that is so interesting here is it's a different dynamic. This is something that you simply can't do without technology. And that's where it becomes really interesting to explore different ways of doing things. We're not replacing paper here. We're adding video and asking learners to share their feedback, share their responses. And obviously on the actual website, it looks really positive and everyone's smiling all the time. But with these tools, it's about exploring and seeing how they work for you. The next section I'd like to consider is about interactive learning quizzes and games. Now, again, we might feel, oh, this isn't what I normally do. I normally use past papers and ask learners to consider what they think, and then we explore what the mark scheme says. Now's the time to consider some additional approaches. You can still do all of those similar things, all of the added value work that you always do, but in a different way. One tool I'm particularly familiar with and very positive about is Kahoot, and all those other links we've got on the public website there. There are additional tools to all these, so this isn't the choice of Cambridge at all. This is one that we're suggesting you explore and think is worthy of your time, but lots of other tools as well. With Kahoot, I was delighted to use this when it first came out in the classroom, because it's about learner engagement, and that often used to be the trick. Sort of 10 or 15 years ago, people would say, oh, use technology because the learners are really engaged. Well, that can't be the excuse anymore. Learners are engaged. Learners are at their computers, they're at their devices, ready to learn, and these tools allow you to grab that enthusiasm, but do far more than just enthusiasm. Here you can create quizzes, you can use quizzes that already exist, but you can adapt them to your context. And it used to be, originally, this was used in class. So you would present the screen in class, learners, if they had access to them, would access on the device, and you trigger a question on the board, they'd respond with their device. But what's become really powerful and hugely worthy of exploration in this current situation is the distance learning tools. So initially you would create a quiz, add your content with a multiple choice quiz, and you can see there on the screen with this posting live option, learners would have those options to respond to, the question would appear, and there's that massive element of competition and brilliant classroom enthusiasm. But where the real power is in these sections, where the author of the quiz or game sets it up, and then it can be assigned to people. There's lots of different options for that. They've done some really good work about emails or links and different ways to do it, so you can explore. But here, the author of the quiz can then set it to say, right, this is going to be open for a certain amount of time. This is going to be open for people to explore and use. That's where the power is with this. Again, this doesn't have to be more work for you as a teacher. This is something that learners can do. The enthusiasm and challenge with getting learners to create their own quizzes and games is next level, because they've got to consider not just the question, they've got to consider the distractors, the incorrect answers, they've got to consider, is that a fair enough correct answer? All of these things that actually it's a much higher level thought process, and they're taking ownership. This is an opportunity to help them lead more in the classroom. Some real opportunities to deliver with added value technology, and a couple of examples here where you can host the game live. So it could be via video conference through Zoom or Skype or any other tools that you're using. You can deliver the quiz absolutely live. You say, right, we're going to do this together, everyone's on their devices, you can see who responds quickest, you can see who responds most accurately. But the assigning games and quizzes that could be played at any time, I think, is the one to explore. In a similar way, we've adapted a few other suggestions in terms of creating online learning content. And again, on the site, we've got a range of suggestions for you. But here I'm going to just pick out one, again, because I think it's something that's worthy of exploration, but keep repeatedly saying this, but it's not the only tool to use. And sort of listening to all of Paul's wise words earlier about experiment with these things and find what works for you. It may be you use this suggested tool and you find it doesn't work for you, but use that learning to say, why didn't it work? Was it a technology thing? Was it a way that it was set up by us as the teachers? Was it a way it was used by the learners? Was it used at the wrong stage? Did you have to do some research and learning first before you asked them to do some more things online? So for this tool, for this example, I'm suggesting Adobe Spark. I particularly like this for all the reasons I also think there are limitations as well. If you've been teaching for a while with technology, you may have experienced that classroom situation where you ask the learners to create a presentation. And I remember myself, you would set this task, you'd think, excellent, this is really good, we've got all the learning objectives, we've got all the requirements, everything. And then you find your learners take 40 minutes to decide on the fonts and the format and the colours. And that's happened with my A-level learners, not always the learners you would think of with. What this tool does is remove that design element from that challenge. It allows you to focus on the content. So Adobe Spark, with the login and access to this, which like many of these companies at the moment is free to access during this troubled times, this has 3 key elements to it. So the first thing they've called social graphics, which if we're being really pedantic, you could just call graphics really. This is about designing some content on screen, but rather than encouraging learners to spend ages looking about considering the design, this is focusing on the content. And it's using templates to drive that content forward. So as well as the graphical, where you could create sort of infographics or posters or other digital media to genuinely, in the name of the tool, spark their interest. The other aspects are web pages. Nothing hugely complicated, but a built-in page that's got some graphics, some text, but focusing on the learning. It's so powerful to use this tool, create something, and then that starts the learning conversation. Oh, how long did you spend doing that? Did you spend ages considering the look and feel, or did you actually focus on what's your core message? What does it actually say? Did you spend too long on the presentation side of it? And these tools help eke those ideas out. And in a similar way, the short videos tool, this is about creating really short animations, really short videos where there's a quick outcome. So focusing on the content. And as Adobe very eloquently presents here, it's presented as effortless creation and beautiful results. If only it was that all the time, but that's why this tool is so useful, because it gets learners to create something, and then you can consider, well, was that a really good use of your time? Was it appropriate to create a fantastic web page, or could you actually have completed the requirements by writing a sentence? So this is about using technology to trigger the learning. This is about adding that value by empowering learners, getting your learners to lead on the technology, but also being high quality students. Your historical skills, historical source analysis, historical how trustworthy, how reliable are these things, those skills are just as valuable today. It's about evaluating how useful was that. And we talk about formative feedback and continually learning. These tools allow you to do that. It's about pushing those learners to consider that. And that's where the role of the teacher is so important. In terms of formative feedback, there's many tools that offer useful guidance and advice here. And it very much comes down to the teacher about how you use these tools. It's not about setting your learners 100 quizzes and you'll see them in a month's time and see how they got on. This is about using tools that can encourage learners. So this tool, again, one of many, is one where you can encourage learners to complete a range of quizzes. You can also create your own and you can explore those. But the power with these tools is actually what happens next. Having got that data about the learners, having been able to explore their responses. So here we've got a really professional looking tool. And actually, when you go into the quiz, we're not talking revolutionary technology here at all. We're talking here a quiz. But when your learners complete this quiz, you can respond to the results. There's lots of different quiz tools, lots have all been pre-set up, and this is an example of one of these, but we're talking quite low level technology here, but the impact is in what happens next, the evaluation you can get from these tools. So here's an example from here how the teacher dashboard shows you how a learner has responded, how the class has responded. But the real power here is what happens to the learner. So when they see a screen like this, the tool then gives them some feedback and suggests what next. The thing I particularly like about this is that they don't get the immediate response about the answer. They're not told that this was the correct answer. At the end of the quiz, they're told, here's some answers, here's some suggestions, here's next steps. So it's about the teacher using tools like this to trigger feedback, to say, well, maybe we didn't quite understand that topic, so maybe we should have an online discussion about that, or let's do a video on this next week, or let's do some research. So use these tools to help trigger the learning. Also, it's amazing to consider what can be used to collate ideas and content. With access to the internet, obviously it's really important to consider e-safety. It's really important to consider your school or your settings directions about e-safety. But using that advice and guidance, you as the teacher again can guide your learners. It's about using tools as effectively and sensibly as possible. And an example here, which you may have heard of before, because this has existed for a while and is really powerful, is about collating existing content. And that can be used for so many different ways. It's not about the use of the tool. That's just the technology we're using as part of the learning. It's then what happens next. So you might ask your learners to conduct some research into a particular topic that you're teaching, but actually what happens next is the important part. So here they can bookmark, you can organize, you can then share those, but it's how you as the teacher ask learners next. Or one of the most powerful questions I remember from teaching is, having taught a topic, having used some amazing piece of technology, ask your learners, how could I have taught this better? If you can accept the responses from that, there is such opportunity, because even though we think we found the most dynamic, amazing tool to do this online learning or remote learning and all these other tools, your learners will constantly surprise you. They will go, oh yes, I did find that tool. That was something I used last year, but actually we're now all using this. And it's about that sense of community that Paul was referring to earlier, about what we can actually do here, sort of the learning that takes place, what other ways might there be, and what opportunities. And it's about bringing all these ideas and suggestions together. Lots of different ways to do this, lots of ways to explore. And the final area I'd like to mention is about survey and or voting tools. A lot of the online tools that you have access to, the Skype and Zoom and whatever tools you're using, they do have voting tools. But consider how you can use those quite simple tools for really effective learning. This example of Poll Everywhere is a tool that's existed for a significant amount of time, but how great during a presentation, during a learner presentation, for a question just to appear on the screen and everyone gets a chance to input, gathering the responses, using the technology to support the learning. It's as simple as that, really. So you get a tool, you get a site like this, you get to access it as a presenter, you pose your question, and then you can get the responses live. It's really simple, really easy. Again, a great opportunity to give to a learner, or maybe you could deliver this for us next lesson. We'd really like you to see how it works, or ask them to evaluate the tool itself. Lots of things to explore. Again, really good in terms of how you can set this up just for your own learners. You have a specific ID or key for the room or the question. When people are on there, you actually get live feedback. And look here, this is where a presenter has actually asked the question, how are you feeling here? And lots of different options. Now, this tool is nothing without engaged learners and an engaged teacher. It's just a survey, but with someone who's interested in this, asking the right questions, using your teacher attributes that Paul was talking about. This is about all of these different things in terms of exploring sort of reflection opportunities, being innovative and engaging. So there's a huge amount to be done here, and it's worth picking off a few things to experiment with and see how they can add value. And the final part for me really is where to find help. So the Cambridge International website is the place to go, and we will continue to update this with suggestions, resources, recordings of webinars, and please do have a look at that. A lot of people are exploring different suggestions, ideas, and we're really excited, interested, and would love to hear from you about what you're doing and how we can help you further.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That's absolutely fascinating, and just goes to show the variety of opportunities that are there. And I think what we're trying to do is to design, in some ways, a new kind of space in which students, learners are learning. And I think it's really important that that space, which is a blend of home learning, remote online learning, it's very much guided by the teacher still, though. So the teacher is the prime person who is helping to design that space, you know, and guiding students through that. It's really important for the student to feel that it's not disconnected in terms of as a space. Things matter, things are connected, they are connected. So it's a social space as well as a technological supported space. And you know, home is really important as in terms of opportunities to learn with family, all kinds of things that can be done there and so on. And then there are other ways, as you've shown through these collaborative tools, etc., for learning to take place. It's about social relationships, and of course this space, this learning space, is in a real world, and we know what is on everyone's minds at the moment about this real world, but we're going to get through this crisis together. So you've mentioned we're going to try, Cambridge International, to be as helpful as possible to teachers, schools around the world. This is the first of a number of webinars. There are lots of ways in which we think we can be helpful. We don't want to overdo that. We're really interested in feedback on where you think we can help best, which aspects. We're going to be focusing on particular aspects of the teaching and learning cycle and seeing what we can do there. So that's going to be coming over the next few weeks. So thank you everyone for your time in listening to this particular webinar, and just simply to end by reminding us all about our shared moral purpose in education, and that for yourselves as teachers, that you are the people who are going to be supportive, inspiring, and reassuring to your learners. And you know, I think your calmness and the stability that you can give them, but also, as Andrew was communicating so well there, that kind of sense of enthusiasm and wonder and that kind of hope for the future is going to be absolutely essential. So thank you very much.